So then, a Gen Z is unlikely to be listening to this podcast. Perhaps they are, if you're like around 18-ish. And our definition of Gen Z, or the timeline, follows generational theory, which is different than I think. Like a lot of people, I think, believe that Gen Z started in the late 90s.
Yeah.
97, so they'd be in their early 20s at this point.
Well, there's that article about the first congressperson that was elected as a Gen Z, 25.
And I think 25 is still officially millennial.
It's still young millennial.
Yeah, it's a young millennial, according to generational theory. And so Gen Zs are, I think, at the top about 18 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Gen Z, there might be a Gen Z out there listening, who knows?
Yeah.
But what would be just like we had pieces of advice for each of these generations, might be pieces of advice perhaps for the parents of Gen Zs or maybe older Gen Zs. Like how could they contend with their shadow and, maybe not undermine themselves?
Maybe you need a little more clarity around the shadow too, as well, because I was going to posit, I've noticed that unlike most generations, Gen Zs do not feel rebellious toward Gen X parents energetically. They feel more rebellious or like pushing back energetically against their millennial older siblings, archetypically. And so it's a really interesting expression of kind of a resistance. I mean, I've noticed that with my children, at least my two sons, are caustic and hostile toward your generation.
Right.
I mean, like, I'm like, guys, whoa. Like, these are people too. I mean, that's like, they're really upset. They feel really bullied and told what to do. And they're really pushing back at feeling like they're being controlled and pushed down.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just specific to them
But
or if that's a generational thing that they, like their peers also feel.
I was going to say, does that sound like them or does that sound like you?
Yeah.
Right. And then it's kind of like, what are they picking up from their parents? Because there's such an overprotected collective generation. They're getting their ideological thinking from their parents. Like that's who they can trust. And that's what makes them feel safe. So that's the community persona, is like, I'm a part of this ideological community, but like, I don't really know what a Democrat is. I don't know what a Republican is, but my mom is, and she says this, and they're not saying that consciously, but they're just performing it because that's what's going to continue to get their needs met.
You got called out. You're like, why does my sons hate you? And you're like, because you hate me, Joel.
Well, we established earlier, I don't hate millennials, remember?
Some of my best friends.
So let me ask you that. So is that what you're positing that, well, I guess I would see this. I'm going to answer my own question because there does seem to be kind of a 50-50. It really depends on who their parents were.
Yeah.
Some Gen Zs, I guess, are very bought into kind of what your millennial eco, but they probably have older millennial parents, just a little younger than me, because I'm a very young Xer. And so what I hear you saying is Gen Z is picking up the affectation of the parental energy around them.
Right.
And so maybe my kids are, well, see, my sons don't spend that much time with me though. They spend more time with their mom. So I don't know if I can totally own this.
Let's offload this.
My two
That's an
sons.
excellent out.
My two sons.
Hot potato.
My two sons. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I don't know how much I'm contributing to this because they're not always around me. They have a lot of other influence, more influence from another person.
They influence
than
each
myself.
other too, and what media they watch and
Absolutely.
what they're exposed to, which can be also influenced by what media the parents watch and things like that.
On the positive, Piper's not talking crap about millennials.
No.
Great. Yeah, I love her. She's
Not
the
yet.
best.
Maybe I'll train her well.
Yeah, we're best friends. So I'm working on it too.
Yeah. Okay. So the again, just remind me the shadow of Gen Z, because I guess maybe I've missed the memo on what we pin that down to be.
If I could, I feel like the phrasing "what's in it for me" is really what's in the shadow. Ultimately, it's like I'm submitting fully. I mean, I wouldn't say submitting consciously, but like as a child, I have to submit fully to whatever my parents' ideology is, or whatever the narrative is, or whatever political party or whatever it is. That's the community persona. They're just following along, but inside, and what leaks out in video games and usually in the work ethic, the quiet quitting, is like, what's in it for me? And that's kind of, I think, the ethos behind quiet quitting is like, what's in it for me? You know, whereas I think millennials and even Gen X in a lot of ways, like we just took what we got. We just dealt with it. We dealt with the failing system. And now Gen Z is like, what's in it for me? This system's falling apart. I'm not going to do anything if there's a falling apart system, because like I'm still a kid. I could still just keep gobbling up what's here. And I'm just going to do what I can to get mine. That's kind of the unconscious, shadow part. So that's what I see.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the advice would be?
Yeah, what are we suggesting here? I mean, they're young though.
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, this is
But maybe
like
advice
I said,
for us as parents.
That's right. The advice might be for us as parents, and to recognize how children in a crisis instinctively, like the entire zeitgeist is pushing them towards obedience.
Yeah.
So be careful what you're downloading into their pristine little hard drives.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of an awareness that like they're paying attention and like gobbling up everything, right?
Yeah.
That's why, like, I mean, we talk about all of these generations having shadows. Part of integrating the shadow is not denying it further, or it's just integrating and being able to be aware of it, so that if you see your kids exhibiting that, you can talk to them about the downsides of it, or just like not expose them to things that are of the bigger world that's so dizzy and chaotic that they have no way of making their own judgments on, because they're too young to do that. It's like giving them alcohol at 6 years old, which happened to some of us. But it's like, I think we're getting closer and closer to feeling like social media and news media and all of these things are just like toxic for the brain in terms of its dizziness and the amount of it and the lack of focus it brings, the dizziness that it can bring. And like for a young brain, we already have these, as parents, we have these judgments about screen time in terms of these things that they're figuring out themselves or watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. But we're ignoring that for ourselves. Like we're constantly rampantly absorbing all of these things from news and the media and stuff. And then that transfers into how we parent, and they pick that up. And then that identity forms in them because they're hyper focused on you. So it's like, now is the time more than ever to I wouldn't say be the best parent because that's so subjective, but it's like, if you're on an individuation path and you owning your mistakes and being honest and, bringing principles and things that are healthy as best as you can to the table, then they will bring that with them. And then when it's time for them to grow and figure out what is in it for me and actually embrace that, then they'll be willing and able to do that more freely.
So I might be coming from a Gen X viewpoint again in saying this, but the lesson I'm taking from this conversation, if I was going to say, Joel, how could you be better at this? Like, what can you do to grow and learn from this conversation? And maybe in a personal way to me, but also in a meta way to maybe somebody listening right now. Mm-hmm. The message I think I'm taking away is, well, if I want my kids, Gen Z, to eventually someday be able to incorporate their shadow, be able to see some of the shadow parts of their archetypical energy that's swirling in their generation, they're going to need to see me do that for myself and my own generational shadow. And they're going to need to see all of us step up. So maybe the learning is, as parents, that if we're doing the work to identify and incorporate some of the shadow material that comes up for us in our from our generation, our kids are going to see that and go, that's what that energy did around me. That's what my mom did or my dad did. And I think that's really benefited them in their life. So it's modeling is I guess that's the message I'm taking away from my own personal life.
Modeling, owning your stuff, owning that you're wrong sometimes, owning that you can change your mind. It's still having authority. It's not relinquishing your authority as a parent, but you don't have to lord over them either necessarily. And finding, there's balance in all areas, and it's tricky to do that. It's a lot to ask of a parent in a busy, crazy, chaotic world. But for the sake of these kids who are asking the question, what's in it for me? And is going to eventually continue to ask the question, what's in it for me? It's asking ourselves, what's in it for them? Why are they suffering through this? Why are they dealing with our turmoil and our chaos? And how can we work through to get them out of it?